Hello, everyone. I'm Brian Reynolds, the Chancellor with the Archdiocese of Louisville, and welcome to our podcast series, What's New in ArchLou. This show highlights the people and ministries of the Archdiocese of Louisville, the Catholic Church in Central Kentucky. Join us each month as we welcome guests to discuss what's new in the Archdiocese and invite you to get more involved as you deepen your engagement with your Catholic faith. This program is brought to you by the ArchLou Podcast Network. I'm really happy today to welcome a special guest. He's Michal Horace. He's our Director of Youth and Young Adult Ministry in the Archdiocese. Michal began his work in last August, so he's not quite here a year yet, and comes to us after serving in the Office of Youth and Young Adults in Portland, Oregon, and most recently as the Director of Young Adult Initiative at St. Meinrad Seminary in southern Indiana. Now, Michal has an interesting background. You're going to hear more about that in a minute. He has a BA in Aerospace Aeronautical Engineering. You're going to change all those words, Michal, because I don't know what all those words mean. From St. Louis University. He also has a MA, master's degree in pastoral ministry from the University of Portland. That I understand. That science one is a little bit tougher for me. So, Michal, that's a little bit of a formal announcement about you, but why don't you take a few minutes and tell us about yourself beyond this short bio, and also, what was that scientific thing I tried to pronounce that I couldn't pronounce?
Sure. Well, again, thank you for having me today. Thank you for welcoming me into the Archdiocese of Louisville. I'm very thrilled to be ministering here in the Archdiocese. I grew up in St. Louis, and so I grew up a St. Louis Cardinals fan, and so I've quickly adopted the University of Louisville Cardinals as well, and so I need clarification of which Cardinals I'm thinking about or someone's talking about at times, yeah. But I'm a big fan of all sports. I'm the youngest of 4 kids, and grew up in a Catholic grade school, Catholic high school, Catholic college, 2 Catholic colleges, and so I'm this month I celebrate my 31st year in full-time ministry, church ministry. So I'm very excited about that.
Very good. Okay, now, you're tired of this joke, I'm sure, but I'm going to have to say it anyway, because people always say in church work, well, it's not rocket science. And you actually say, well, as a matter of fact.
I've many times used that phrase.
I'm sure.
I've actually done rocket science. So, yeah, I have a degree in aerospace engineering, and in college I did rocket science. As an engineer, I didn't do rocket science. I did aviation engineering.
I just asked that because it's going to be part of our talk about how did you go from that into youth ministry? You began, if I remember the story right, working part-time in parish youth ministry. That was part of my background, too, back in the 70s. That was a long time ago for me. While working as an aerospace engineer, you worked part-time as a parish youth ministry, and then you ended up transitioning to full-time youth ministry. Tell us about that transition. What called you from aerospace engineering into youth work?
Yeah, well, we could do an entire podcast on just that story itself. But trying to summarize it, I remember feeling a calling in high school, and remember going and talking to different friends and priests and other folks about that calling, and I discerned that it wasn't to the priesthood, but it was still there, and so I put it on the back burner. And meanwhile, in high school, I was involved in youth ministry at my parish. Graduated from high school and then started, actually stepped away from youth ministry for a year, and then was at my parish mass, and Patricia Miller, one of the adults helping with the youth ministry at my parish, asked me if I would help out with the youth ministry canoe trip, the weekend canoe trip, which I'd done many times as a youth, and that question is so seminal to my ministry because that was the moment of my invitation to ministry. And so I remember that moment like it was yesterday. And so I did. I helped out with youth ministry in high school, then became an aerospace engineer and moved to the Washington, D.C. area, started volunteering with youth ministry, did some part-time work in youth ministry, and after about 6 years discerned that the engineering was not what God was calling me to, and continued to talk to friends and I believe very much that the Holy Spirit speaks to me through other people. And many other people mentioned youth ministry, that I should consider going into that full time. And so spent a lot of time in prayer, and there were multiple signs, which to me is the Holy Spirit interacting in my life and making it clear. And so I took a leap of faith and actually was hired as a coordinator of youth ministry at the parish I was born and raised in St. Louis. Moved back to St. Louis. And it wasn't until about a month or so into that ministry that I was in prayer and I realized, this is it. The stars are aligned. This is my ministry. This is my calling. This is the vocation that I felt in high school. And finally, all the pieces were in place. And I have no regrets kind of taking the long way around. As a matter of fact, I think that made me a better minister. But it was a great journey.
You know, we've had others on the show who talk about vocation and calling and ministry, and there's a similar phrase. You used it there when you said there was a point of invitation. That's an important point beyond our topic today. This call of an invitation.
Yeah, and not just the invitation, but just as Mary did the acceptance of the invitation. I think that's a real key part. And doing that in a sense of prayer and a sense of conversations with others as well.
Very good. Now, some of the stuff I wanted to talk about today with you about your role in the office here in the Archdiocese. I want to talk about young people, youth, and a separate group called young adults, and we'll talk about that difference in a few minutes. Mm-hmm. And I want to talk about those people who minister with them. What are the challenges that young people are facing? What are the challenges that the ministry is facing? So that's what we're going to get into there. But just a little bit more about your background. You know, you've had the opportunity because of your work to serve even beyond a diocese. I know you worked in Portland. You worked at St. Meinrad Seminary. Now you're joined our staff. But you've also been involved nationally with the National Federation for Catholic Youth Ministry. You've also been involved in things like World Youth Day, La Red, different organizations. Just to expand your experience before we get into young people, tell us about what you've done beyond diocesan work.
Sure. I've always felt, I think we all have an obligation to do some service to the greater church. And so I've been blessed to do a lot of work with the National Federation for Catholic Youth Ministry, NFCYM. NFCYM is the bishop's approved organization for those who minister to young people. And so for me, it's basically my professional organization. So I've been very involved with NFCYM for many, many years. I've served on many different committees here and there. Was very proud to serve on the board of directors for a couple terms, and served as the chairman of the board of directors of NFCYM for 2 years. So NFCYM has helped me as a minister, and I hope I can continue to help NFCYM. With the U.S. Bishops Conference, USCCB, I've just been involved over the years in doing some different projects for them, whether chairing or being a member of a committee. I've been on several writing teams for some of the USCCB documents. And then last year, they invited me to be on their staff for their World Youth Day in Lisbon, Portugal. And so that was a real treat in being on their staff. Most of my job was hanging out at the hotel and assisting the U.S. bishops who were present at World Youth Day. And that was just a huge treat to just get to know more of our shepherds and work with them. And then the other organization that I'm currently involved in is La Red, which is the National Catholic Network for Hispanic Youth and Young Adult Ministry. La Red means the net or the network in Spanish. And so I'm on their board of directors, and I like to think that I'm a bridge builder, particularly between the Anglo community and the Hispanic community, and helping all of us realize that Hispanic youth ministry, often called Pastoral Juvenil Hispana, is a unique and culturally appropriate ministry with our young people, especially from Hispanic Latino backgrounds. And so just trying to bridge those gaps.
I asked you those questions to help our listeners understand you have a wide variety of experience. So when we now explore young people in the church, I wanted to have your picture in the background, because I think you bring a tremendous amount of credibility, Michael. And we're glad to have you on staff here, but I think it would be helpful for our listeners to know a little bit about you that way. So let's talk about young people first. So let's talk about who are youth, what are they facing here in 2024? Youth first, young adults later.
Sure. Often I'm asked what age is considered youth in youth ministry. And basically, we consider those young people who are in middle school and in high school within the realm of youth ministry. The one thing with young people in youth ministry is they all have a commonality of being in school. And so that's something that we all can take advantage of and work with, that they all have that common situation. You'll see in young adult ministry, that's a whole different world with that. Young people today are, they're wonderful, great young people, but they have so many choices, so many options in this world. It can be very overwhelming. One thing that we want to make sure that we do as ministers with them is help them to slow down, help them to remind them about prayer and about silence and about listening. But today's youth, especially having gone through COVID, it's just been a very challenging time for them.
Lots of people think people who work with youth are amazed at the work you have to tackle, because the variety of things you just mentioned, the challenges young people face. Can you talk about some of the challenges you've seen? You already talked a little bit about the commonality, but there's things these days of young people with depression, with isolation. There's obviously family struggles, in personal and interpersonal challenges. What rises to the top of that?
Yeah, without a doubt, there are statistics that are telling us how isolated today's generation of young people feel, and there's a generational distrust of organizations, and that cuts through all different types of organizations. But the Catholic Church, even though we're faith-based, we are an organization, so that also is a challenge with us, is helping young people to better trust and to understand and to know we're here to support them and to accompany them.
Yeah. Before we get into the work of the office, let's try the other age group. I hate to connect them because I know they're not as connected as sometimes our words make it sound. So talk about young adult. And it's okay if you say lasts all the way up into your late 60s. I won't be insulted.
Not quite that much.
Okay.
But the U.S. bishops define young adults as those people who are in their late teens, 20s, and 30s. So often you'll hear the term 18 to 39 or 18 to 40. And with young adults, just as there's that commonality with youth that they're all in school, with young adults, it's across the board. You have single, married, separated, divorced. You have kids, no kids, part-time kids. You have full-time working, part-time working, full-time student, unemployed. The diversity is just through the roof when it comes to young adults, and I think that is a challenge, but also there are ways we can leverage that. There's no way that we want to try to minister to everyone in that group in the same way.
Yeah, I was going to say that I understand college age, but you described that as something way longer than that.
Yeah, so what ministry with young adults really focuses on is more niche ministry, more groupings of young adults, not one young adult group that can minister to all the young people. A young adult group can be one of the many ways of ministering, but it's much more how can we help young mothers. That's probably the easiest young adult grouping to gather together. How can we help the men or the women? And so young adult ministry as you mentioned, there's a challenge with young adult ministry in that there are a lot of people that think it's just youth ministry for older people.
Yep.
And it's not at all. It's a very unique and very different form of ministry, a ministry in which we're really trying to help make connections with young adults with Jesus, with their parish, with the Catholic Church, and with their peers. And it's our church needs to do more work in ministering to our young adults.
Yeah, they are. You often hear the most disconnected age group are younger people in their 20s, and that's too broad a statement to make like that. But is that correct?
Yeah, and you'll find because of that, not all, but the bulk of young adult ministry does focus on 20-somethings.
Okay. So here in the Archdiocese, we have an agency, one of our 21 agencies. It's called the Office of Youth and Young Adults. What are some of the ministries that fall under that umbrella that you're charged with overseeing?
Sure. Well, obviously, youth ministry and the youth ministries that happen in our Catholic parishes, young adult ministry that happens in our parishes, and our other organizations and schools within the Archdiocese. My office also supports high school campus ministry leaders, college campus ministry leaders, and we even have some subsets of youth ministry that my office supports, such as Catholic Scouting. Most people don't think of Catholic Scouting as youth ministry, but it truly is. It's a way that our church responds to the needs of our youth, and our diocese has many different flavors of Catholic Scouting, including the Girl Scouts, the Boy Scouts, the American Heritage Girls, and Trail Life USA. So those are some of the many different subsets within that my office ministers with.
And tell us about the people you work with, meaning youth ministers first. Some who are employed?
Yeah, we have, well, first, one clarification I like to do is that, Brian, you're a youth minister, and I'm a youth minister, and everyone listening and watching are youth ministers because of our baptism. So that's one thing we all need to realize, is that we are all youth ministers, and we all have a role to play in supporting our young people. At every parish, we hope there is someone who is coordinating that effort, who's directing that effort. And so we interchange a bit between the term youth minister and coordinator of youth ministry, but really what you're talking about are people who are coordinators or directors of youth ministry in our parishes. And they're the ones who are taking the vision of the pastor and trying to meet the needs of our young people. They are the ones who are not necessarily the only people, certainly not the only people working with young people, but more importantly, a good coordinator of youth ministry is working more with adults than they work with young people, because they are recruiting other adults to accompany and to work with our young people. And it's really a multiplying type of ministry, but it's important to not think of the coordinator of youth ministry as the Pied Piper in the parish that's going to meet all the religious needs of all the young people. Their job is to quarterback that effort.
Way back when I was a youth minister, some 45 years ago, a lot of youth ministry was basically a youth group and maybe some social activities, trips and things like that. What has evolved? Because it certainly is a different function today, what goes on in parish youth ministry.
Yeah, there was a time when youth group was kind of like the central piece and maybe the only piece of youth ministry in parishes. And there's so much wisdom that we've learned along the way, and some wonderful supporting documents that came from the U.S. bishops. Today, we focus a little bit more on a comprehensive perspective of youth ministry. So it's not necessarily that it's a single one youth group that's trying to meet all the needs, but we have many different efforts. And one of the evolutions I think we're seeing is actually starting to evolve not away from events. We're still going to do events, just like our liturgy is a face-to-face, in-person event. But I think you're seeing less of an emphasis on events and more of an emphasis on personal relationships, on accompanying young people, on helping everyone understand their baptismal call to support our young people and to be there for them.
And that has changed. So how the either the volunteer or the paid professional does their work in a parish, right?
Right. Yeah. And we do have some longtime veterans who teach me things all the time, who are so good at what they do, who are in our parishes. We also have some part-time folks, and we have many parishes just have a volunteer. And sometimes that's a long-term volunteer. Other places that's a volunteer this month and another volunteer next month. Everyone has golden hearts in wanting to support our young people, but we do want to make sure that those who are working with our young people and coordinating those efforts have some formation in ministry with young people, and certainly have passed the background checks and the safe environment training and things like that we have in Archdiocese.
Sure. Now, as you approach your, I guess, 1-year anniversary of serving here in this Archdiocese, what are some things you may have learned or observed about church ministry, youth ministry here in the Archdiocese?
Well, first off, we have a long history in this Archdiocese as one of the first inland dioceses in the country, as the first inland diocese in the country. And we've always had youth ministry. It's not quite always been as organized or as recognized as it is today. But the Office of Youth and Young Adults has been around for a long time, and there have been some incredible leaders that have worked in that office, many of which have name recognition across the country. And I stand on the shoulders of the directors and the associate directors that office has had over the years. So we've had a very long, proud history of youth ministry within the Archdiocese. In this Archdiocese, we have a very strong Catholic school system, and so that's something to use to our advantage from a parish ministry perspective. So I hope that my office helps to collaborate and coordinate efforts between the high school campus ministers and the parish coordinators of youth ministry. And then finally, we just have some very, very dedicated coordinators of youth ministry in this Archdiocese.
Very good. Well, yes, there's a long history, and each era has some new opportunities, and you're helping us discover those right now, Michael. Let's turn our attention then to young adult ministry. That's relatively new for us in some ways. We even have a young adult board who you connect with a bit. So tell us about your experience of young adults. You said a little bit already, but I know this. Tell us some more.
Yeah. Young adults have so much to offer our church, and I think we have a tendency to not pay attention to our young adults as much as we could. It's very common that a young adult will come up to me and say that they heard that the liturgy committee was looking for new people. They went to a liturgy committee meeting, and it wasn't said out loud, but it was clearly communicated. Okay, you're the new kid. You just sit in the corner. Let us do the work. When we die, you can take over, type of thing.
Okay.
And so I think our church needs to be much more intentional with welcoming and developing young adult leaders and offering them more leadership positions and trusting that they're going to make mistakes. We all make mistakes, but more and more helping our young adults in helping lead and take their rightful place in our parishes.
So get them engaged now as opposed to just a training ground
Right,
for the future.
Absolutely.
I know before you came here, you spent a number of years at the seminary, St. Meinrad in southern Indiana, on a project called the Young Adult Initiative, I believe in part because so many dioceses and many Christian denominations were asking the same set of questions. What do we do to be effective with this work? Can you tell us anything about that project and what you discovered in those years?
Yeah, it was a wonderful project. The St. Meinrad received a Lilly grant for 5 years to study, to work with parishes really, and try a whole bunch of things as to what works more effectively with ministry to our young adults. I wish I could say there was a silver bullet that's it. That's if we just do that one thing.
That was my next question.
Unfortunately, we didn't find that. But we did find a lot of things. One of them I've already mentioned is making room for young adults in leadership positions within the parish. That's so key, so important. Another is ensuring that the pastor is on board with an effort like that. If committees try to do that on their own, that might be challenging. But if the pastor is supportive and on board with, yes, we are going to make room for our young adults, and I want every committee of our parish to be more young adult friendly and to engage and invite young adults, more young adults to be a part of our leadership, I think that's one of the things that could help a lot. And I think the last thing is that we found that ministry to young adults is a whole parish effort. It's not just letting the young adults do their young adult thing. We have a challenge there's something we called in young adult ministry called the death spiral, and that's where a young adult is very involved and engaged and wants to get some more things organized within their parish, and so they get something going, and they might get some great things going, but then they have a life change. And so they move on, and everything collapses. And then a few months later, the whole cycle starts over again. And our church, I think we're learning that our church has an obligation to be more supportive of the things that our young adults are doing and help them to perpetuate even when people move on. Somebody once told me that we really need to focus on the fact that we prepare our young adults today at our parish for their next parish. And they're going to move on. We know that. Let's accept that. Let's work with that. And what a joy when well-formed young adults come to our parish that were formed at another parish. So some of those things with changing the mindset of everyone within the parish.
I'm hearing a theme here. We're all youth ministers. Ministry to youth and young adults is a whole parish effort.
Absolutely.
Michael, you're not letting any of us off the hook. What's that message about? We're to do this work, all of us.
Yeah, we are. We're called by our baptism to be doing this work. And so that's why, again, a coordinator of youth ministry is trying to mobilize everyone in the parish, is trying to form and educate everyone in the parish that they have a part to play. And that part might be active involvement in the youth ministry effort. That part might be a parishioner that volunteers to write birthday cards for every young person in the parish. They never show up for a youth ministry event. They don't want to be involved in that, but they're a youth minister by what they're doing there. Some folks are just there with their schedule and their time. All they have is their prayers, and that alone is a very powerful way that all of our people can minister with our young adults, is to pray for them.
Very good. It's a dangerous question to ask because none of us have a perfect crystal ball. But take us out about 5 years. What are the goals and hopes as you look ahead for the work in this local diocese for youth and young adult ministry?
Well, I certainly hope that pastors and ministers in the parishes will reach out to the Office of Youth and Young Adults if they have questions or they are looking for formation within the area of youth and young adults. I think I know when I was in a parish, there's a tendency sometimes to look at the diocese as the ministry police and the people who have all these rules and regulations. And we do have some rules and regulations that are there to protect our young people and to protect our ministers. But my job in my office is to be a collaborator with those folks in the parishes. And so I hope they see me as that and will reach out as much as they can. I really do hope we get to a point, maybe in 5 years, where everyone in the parish realizes that they are a youth minister, they are a young adult minister, and that they know they have a part to play, and they've discerned through the different options, and they are actively playing their part in some way.
So rather rather than youth ministry being an isolated effort for a small group, it's for all of us. When children are baptized at Mass or other settings, RCIA happens, there's always a call to the congregation to serve, and that's your call. I hear that call for all of us, is we all should be responding to the needs of young people in our church and beyond. Michael, thank you for your service in this Archdiocese and far beyond over the many years you've served. We're lucky to have someone with your breadth and depth of background serving as our coordinator. I got the word now, coordinator of Youth and Young Adult Ministry for our diocese. The church has been blessed by your work around the country, and now we're lucky to have you here, and we're grateful for that. So we appreciate you. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you very much.
And thanks to our viewers and listeners for joining us for this month's episode of What's New in ArchLou. Tune in again next month.